Hello, my name's James. I'm a tutor at Homeschool Tutoring. I'm also an English teacher specializing in Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3, Key Stage 4. In this tutorial, what I'm going to do is talk you through AQA English Language Paper 2, and I'm going to discuss all 5 questions from both Section A and Section B. So let's get into this. So what I've chosen to use is the June 2023 exam paper. It's fairly recent and I've taught this in my school. What I would like to focus on is my approach, my systematic approach to these questions, how I want to think about answering them, because paper 2, some students argue that's a little bit trickier than paper 1. I think owing to the fact that it's got 2 sources, it can be a bit confusing at times, but hopefully through this tutorial, I will simplify things and make your understanding of the paper a little bit clearer. With paper 2, we've got 2 sources. One is 20th century, one is 19th century. So what we would expect from that is that the language style is going to be slightly different. It's going to be slightly older. Certainly with 1933 publication of One's Company, even older still, Records of a Girlhood, published in 1878, we're going to perhaps come across some rather antiquated vocabulary. So all I could suggest in preparation for paper 2 is you can download past papers, you can download past inserts, have a look, familiarize yourself with the language. That's probably the best piece of advice I can give. Obviously, we don't know what's going to be in the exam series for this summer, but as with everything, all things related to English, the one thing that you can do to help yourself, read widely, read often, builds up your vocabulary, it builds up your understanding of different styles of language, different expressions, and so on. So that is all I can advise at this moment in time. So let's get into this. Let's have a look. So question 1, read again the first part of source A from lines 1 to 7. Again, I've emphasized this in paper 1, but it's really important that you make sure you understand the question. You're only focusing on source A for this question. You're only focusing on lines 1 to 7. So what that means is this highlighted paragraph here at the top of source A, that is the only area where you are taking your references from. It's the only part of the text that you need to read for this question. So really make sure that you understand the question. Don't rush it. Spend as much time in as you need on the question. It may sound foolish because I'm contradicting myself due to the time constraints we have. The exam, we only have an hour and 45 minutes, but make sure that you understand the question. So for question 1, all we are doing, we are shading the circles in the boxes which we think are true. If we don't think they're true, we don't shade those circles, okay? Choose 4 statements below which are true. That's all we need to do for 4 marks. Maximum amount of time I would spend on this question is 5 minutes. What I will do as well to save some time, but also to give you the best examples of what the examiners have found through marking their exams, I will use the mark scheme. So here you can see that a student has selected B, D, F, and H. They found 4 examples of information which are true, linking to AO1, which is identify and interpret explicit and implicit information and ideas. So similar to question 1 in paper 1, the examiners are asking us to identify, right, what's obvious, maybe what's less obvious, okay? But in a way, it's slightly easier, this question, because you've got the statements there. So make sure you read again, select your 4 statements which you believe to be true. If for whatever reason you change your mind, you just draw a big cross through the box and then select the new circle which you think is true. What I would suggest is don't shade the entire box. You just need to shade the little ovals there, as you can see in the box. So maximum amount of time for question 1 is 5 minutes. That's all you need to do. Okay, so let's move on and have a look at question 2. So You need to refer to source A and source B for this question. So you are bringing together, you are synthesizing information from both sources. Okay. So you're reading both texts, you're reading them in full, and you are bringing information to write about, to synthesize and present your ideas. You're showing how source A and source B are perhaps similar, are perhaps different. So pay attention to the wording of the question. The writers in source A and source B are traveling on different types of trains. So that's something they have in common. But we know that source A was published in 1933. We know that source B was published in 1878. So we would expect that there are, indeed, like I've just explained, some differences in language choice and expression, but we could also expect there to be reference to slightly different technology, bearing in mind that there is over 50 years difference between the train journeys. So one can expect that there are going to be some slight differences. Okay. 8-mark questions, a maximum of 10 marks. I would say minimum of 2 paragraphs, but for comfort and safety, aim for 3. But again, time is of the essence in the exam. So 2 paragraphs minimum. If you have the luxury of time to write 3, by all means do so to give you that cushion. But that's what we would expect to aim for. So the writing source A and source B are traveling on different types of trains. It's really imperative that you also signpost from which source you've taken your references from. So make it clear that it's source A, clear that it's source B. And I will show you now what a top level response to this question has looked like. So for question 2, it's AO1, identify and interpret explicit and implicit information ideas. So again, what is obvious? What do we need to read between the lines, so to speak, to identify what is your interpretation, what is your analysis? And again, we're synthesizing evidence from different texts. So we're bringing 2 texts together and we're thinking about them. What are the similarities? What are the differences? We're being the judge and we are evaluating these 2 sources. So as you can see here, I have got a level 4 response and level 3 response. I'm only going to spend time focusing on the top level responses for these questions because I believe that as you are here in the first place, you are a very ambitious student and you want to achieve the highest levels you can. So we always want to be ambitious. We always want to be aiming for the very top level marks. So this is for the duration of the exam walkthrough. I'm only going to be focusing on the top level. So level 4, we've been asked to make perceptive inferences from both texts, select judicious references. You are the judge, you decide which best reflects the train journeys and also perceptive differences between the texts. So you're looking for clues, what is different. We know that there is going to be some difference because of the time periods from which both books were published, both texts even, and we know there's going to be some technological differences, don't we? We also know there's going to be some language differences. So we have some clues already. The example here on the right under indicative standard. The train in source A is being used to transport mail and people, and so has a mail van, a dining car, and 5 sleeping cars. So information from the text, which is obvious, and it's also been clearly signposted from which these references have been taken from source A, showing both the advances in train manufacture and the commercialization of train travel to enable long journeys by providing eating and sleeping facilities. So that's a sort of very perceptive and a very judicious explanation of the technology of that train from source A. So where we're looking at perceptive differences between texts, this sophistication reflects the significant progress in train travel and is a complete contrast to source B, where the steam engine is an earlier model and is therefore much simpler in its design. So the student has identified a clear contrast. They've identified clear differences. Yes, they're both traveling in a similar mode of transport. However, the age and time period has already given us some clues. We know there is going to be some difference. In source B, the train is just a functional uncovered carriage with benches, as the purpose at this early stage of invention is to develop the mechanics of the engine, not to provide more elaborate passenger facilities. So what the student has done there, they've explained, well, what are the reasons for why were these trains manufactured? Why were they developed in such this way? Train travel is largely for passenger transport. You're thinking about passenger transport, you're thinking about comfort, you're thinking about perhaps luxury, amenities, all these kinds of things. So you're bringing your ideas, your knowledge about the wider world perhaps to this question and thinking about, right, well, why were those trains made the way they were? What was the purpose of them? Okay, imagine if you were in a position where you were writing about an Airbus A330 or one of the first Wright brothers planes. They can both fly, but there are very clear differences, aren't they, as well? So just as a very quick example, we're looking at the differences, aren't we? We're looking at the differences between the texts. So let's move on to question number 3. Question 3. You now need to refer only to source A from lines 12 to 23. So again, make sure you know which source it is. We've got source A and we've got lines 12 to 23, which is one paragraph in the middle of the text there. That is all we need to look at for this particular question, question 3. It's purely a language analysis question, so we're thinking immediately about verbs, adjectives, adverbs, nouns, more sophisticated language techniques like metaphor, simile, personification, alliteration, onomatopoeia, all those kinds of things. So we're considering how has the writer used language to describe the train crash. So with any language question, you've got to make sure, like I've always said, make sure you read the question, read it again. And there's three main areas we really need to think about with this question. The first one is, I would say, let's not do how, let's do language. So language is the words on the page. We all know that. But why has the writer, when they were creating this piece of work, out of all the words they could have chosen, why have they chosen these ones to describe the train crash? Okay, and we're thinking about the effects. The effects are, what pictures do the words put in our mind? What impressions do we get? What do we think? What can we envisage? How can we imagine the train crash? Okay, so that comes under the how bit. What are the effects on the words? The pictures that the words put in our minds. Okay, and the focus of the question is solely about the train crash. We're not interested in anything else. We're solely focusing on the train crash itself. How is it described? Is it a violent crash? Is it a calm crash? We've kind of got some clues already, but that's what we're focusing on. We want to analyze the language in depth and think about, right, what is the writer trying to show us about this event and why? What effect? What are they trying to make us think and feel? It's a 12-mark question. I would say 15 minutes maximum, a minimum of 3 paragraphs, ideally 4. And all we're doing again is we're focusing on source A just from lines 12 to 23. So what I will do again, I'm looking at the mark scheme for the best of what as AQA have gathered together. So it's AO2, the assessment objective 2, which is explain, comment on, and analyze how writers use language and structure to achieve effects and influence readers. So influencing readers, what is it making us think and feel? But with AO2, for this question, we are only focusing on language. We're not interested in structure for this one. Okay. So let's have a look here. So level 4, skills descriptors. We're analysing the effects of the language, select a range of judicious textual details, make sophisticated and accurate use of subject terminology. So you're identifying your methods. The writer has used simile, the writer has used metaphor, the writer has used this adjective to achieve this effect on the reader. Why have they done that? Okay. An example. The writer uses hyperbole. My heaviest suitcase was cannonaded down to describe how the impact of the train crash was like a deliberate act of warfare. So there's very perceptive. That is a very perceptive judgment inference of the use of language. Why on earth has the writer used this method? What are they trying to achieve? How are they trying to affect the reader? Remember, if any of you have watched my paper 1 tutorial, we're always thinking about if it's a work of fiction, which these 2 texts appear to be. It's works of fiction, but they're there to, what's the purpose of them? The purpose is to inform. The purpose is to entertain. So we're thinking the writer has used entertaining vocabulary. What kind of pictures they're trying to depict? Maybe like a chaotic scene. Okay. The use of the military verb cannonaded conveys the writer's sense of being victimized as he describes the simple dislodging of his suitcase by physical force as a metaphorical attack by the train, as it has turned his own possessions into a weapon to be used against him. So a really excellent analysis, a piece of analysis here, reflecting on the choice of vocabulary through a small group of words. The reader has then been given this impression that it's like warfare in the carriage, it's chaos, it's like a battle almost. But I think here the student has really zoomed in on the word cannonaded. You know, they've identified expertly military verb cannonade. It's like cannon firing off. Has this train carriage become hostile? And they've really done well to explain and interpret what they think this quote means. Okay, so you can do a lot with a very little. One word there, the student has managed to prise this open and explain in great detail what the effect is on the reader. Okay, so remember, fiction text is all about entertaining the reader. Why is the writer chosen this vocabulary? And as you can see there, whilst I've been talking about level 4, you can have a look and compare level 3 and level 2. But as I say, with this tutorial, we're always aiming for the very top, just to make things a little bit easier for everyone. So, question 3, source A only, lines 12 to 23. Make sure you understand where you're getting your information from. 15 minutes max, language analysis question. Question number 4. So for this question, you need to refer to the whole of source A together with the whole of source B. So we will have read the whole of source A and the whole of source B already because we are focused on source A and source B. Okay. If your teachers have explained to you that you can do the questions in any order you wish, you can do. I know that some teachers do advise this. I have shared that idea with my students before, although I say to them, it's really up to you what you feel comfortable with in the exam. It's what best suits you on the day. But for example, if you did the questions in reverse, question 4, it's a 16-mark question. So you're going straight for the big marks straight away. You get an opportunity to read source A and source B. So you'll have a better picture and a better understanding of what's going on. So this will directly inform your approach to, if we were doing this in reverse, for example, question 3 there, source A, lines 12 to 23. So you already know what's going on in the whole of the source. Okay, so it's a bit of food for thought, but like I say, it is up to you how you approach the exam. And leading on to that, for the lower mark questions, question 2, there again, you've already read the sources, you have a better understanding, you've worked on a more challenging question, and you've deepened your ideas, your analysis. Perhaps that will help you for question 2. And finally, for question 1, if we're doing this in reverse, you'd have a much better understanding. So, like I say, it is up to you, but there are different ways of doing it. You do not have to do it linearly from 1 to 5. You can do it in reverse if you wish. So for question 4, source A, source B, the whole of them, compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives about their experience of traveling on the train. So in your answer, you could compare the different feelings and perspectives. You could basically means you should. So these are the kinds of things. The examiners are giving you some hints here. Compare the methods the writers use to convey their different feelings and perspectives, so you can identify both language and structure for these questions. For this question, my apologies. So you think about language, thinking about structure. Support your response with references to both texts. So again, like we have done in question 2, make sure that you are signposting where you're getting the information from. Is it source A? Is it source B? You've got to be really clear. If you're confusing the examiner, if and when they are marking the exams, they've got a lot to get through. They haven't got time to be decoding things. So make sure you make it easy for them. You want to get the marks, don't you? Okay, so make all that hard work, all that revision that you've been building up to from year 10, year 11, make sure it counts on the day. Make sure you're giving the examiners what they want, do what you've been asked to do. 60 marks, maximum 20 minutes. I would say a minimum of 4 paragraphs, hopefully 5. Again, like I've always said, time is of the essence. Don't stretch yourself. If you manage to get 4 paragraphs down, that's absolutely fantastic. So for question number 4, I will just scroll down here. So what we are doing, we are addressing assessment objective 3, compare writers' ideas and perspectives as well as how these are conveyed across 2 or more texts. So you're comparing, you're making comparison. You're bringing 2 things together. We know that both sources are concerned with train travel, but we also know that they're different as well because there are different experiences. Some similarities, some differences. Okay, make sure that you double check the wording of this question because sometimes AQA can change the wording of the question slightly. So depending on what we get, always be switched on, always be mindful that there may be a slight twist in the question. So again, just to remind us, compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives about the experiences of traveling on a train. So the key word there is compare. We're bringing them together. We're thinking about them both. How do the writers convey their different feelings? Well, of course, they are writers. The clue is they have written words on the page. That's how they are conveying their feelings and perspectives. Okay, so that means what words have they chosen and what effect do they have on the reader? What images do they put in your mind? What do you think? What do you feel towards the writers? What can you see in your mind about through their descriptions? How do you think they are thinking and feeling? Do you empathize with them? Are you annoyed with them? This is the kind of train of thought that you are being asked to consider with this question. So support your response with references to both texts. So again, we are bringing references from both texts, aren't we? Both language and structure. So the top level compares ideas and perspectives in a perceptive way. So analyzes how writers' methods are used, selects a range of judicious supporting details from both texts. So that's basically you're the judge, you decide what best quotes support the question in hand, shows details and perceptive understanding of the different ideas and perspectives in both texts. So you can see they're color-coded there. And as we read through the indicative standard, we can decide for ourselves, well, what do we think? So the writer of Source A feels that his experience of traveling by train has been something to be endured rather than enjoyed and cannot wait for his journey to end after over a week of travel. So that's a clear statement. Source A, how the writer's thinking and feeling. They're enduring this train trip. They're hating it. They're not enjoying it. And they can't wait for it to finish. It's been a week long of travel. It's too much. His use of repetition and listing of no more in his first paragraph not only makes it clear how many tedious aspects of the journey he disliked, but also reflects the intense monotony he has felt on his trip. In complete contrast, so again, that's a really nice discourse marker, in complete contrast. So using the vocabulary of comparison, compare, contrast, but this time the student is showing the differences. They are indicating that there is a stark difference between the two. In complete contrast to these contemptuous and weary feelings of the writer of Source A, the writer of Source B is filled with admiration and awe as she embraces the novelty of train travel. So it's very different, isn't it? We can see there's a clear contrast there. The student has identified that there's clear differences. She indicates this from the start of her letter with the idea that ordinary writing paper is not adequate to contain her raptures. So raptures is she's feeling raptured, she's feeling very happy, she's feeling very excited. Her use of raptures has connotations of euphoria and almost spiritual experience. So very perceptive analysis there of that one word, that one quote. Like I always say, less is more in the exam. Choose one word, break it apart as much as you can. The only way that we can be really good analyzers of language, again, like I said at the very start, the more we read texts, film, any kind of literature we're reading, we're always absorbing language, we're always absorbing the meaning. So that's how we get to the top level. We're always reading, okay? Here, the writer of Source B establishes the idea of how fantastical her trip was. So, clear distinctions between the two journeys, okay? So, as you can see, they're level 4. There are other levels, but like I say, I'm just focusing on the top one today. You can get past papers from AQA. You can also get them from Revision World. It's a very popular website for students, teachers alike to get resources. You can get all kinds of mark schemes, past papers, inserts, and so on for all your revision needs. So that in essence is question 4. Question number 5. So this is section B. This is the writing section. You're advised to spend about 45 minutes on this section. Writing full sentences. You're reminded of the need to plan your answer. You should leave enough time to check your work at the end. I always hammer home to my students, always proofread, always check your work, because it could literally be the difference between a mark. It could be the difference between a 3 and a 4, which is somewhere that we don't really want to be at all. Obviously, with all the hard work that we've put in through revision, we want to be maximizing our marks. If we have the luxury of having 5 or 10 minutes at the end of the exam, proofread your work, go through it, spellings, punctuation, grammar, all your spag, you need to be making sure that that's all tip top. That is what you're getting your marks for. That is what the examiners want to see. It's worth it because you don't want to throw away a grade, a mark for being not paying attention at the end of the exam, not spending that last 5 minutes, making every minute count. Okay. So, question 5. We get given a statement. Cars are convenient, comfortable, and save time. However, we need to use them less by making public transport such as trains, trams, and buses cheaper, more reliable, and easier to access. Write a speech to be given at a meeting of your local council in which you argue your point of view on this statement. 24 marks for content and organisation, 16 marks for technical accuracy, 40 marks. You're advised to plan your answer to question 5 before you start to write. So can't emphasise enough how important that is. We need to plan. Okay. 24 marks content and organisation. Let me just show you the breakdown of what that actually means. Demystify things a little bit. So for AO5, communicating clearly, effectively, and imaginatively, selecting and adapting tone, style, and register for different forms, purposes, and audiences. And also organising information and ideas using structure and grammatical features. So for level 4, for a top level response to this question, 19 to 24 marks, you're basically aiming to write adult level. Imagine that you walk into a bookshop, it could be W.H. Smith, it could be Waterstones. You see a book on the shelf. It's a published book. It's a top level author. That is the kind of level. For the top marks, that is the kind of thing you're aiming for. You're aiming to show the examiners that you've got adult level vocabulary, you've got adult level command of description, tone, style, register of punctuation. Okay. So for the skills descriptors here, communication is convincing and compelling. So that linking back to my analogy there about reading a published book, the communication is convincing. If we're writing something that's persuasive, a speech, imagine that you are watching perhaps maybe the Prime Minister or a president of some country on TV addressing the nation. The best way you can prepare for speech writing, go on YouTube or on the internet in general, type in speeches, the best speeches. You know, there's some fantastic works out there that you can use to get ideas and inspiration. Pay attention to how the professionals do it, how they speak, how they articulate themselves, how they pause, how they emphasize words. Okay. Tone, style, and register. So again, that's the tone. Are you trying to write a serious speech? Maybe something that's a bit more humorous. What's your style? What kind of language you're going to use? And register, how are you addressing and talking to the audience? So again, all these things are affected. Tone, style, and register in English. You can research this in a little bit more detail on YouTube. There is a wealth of resources out there to help you with this. And the last bullet point there, extensive and ambitious vocabulary with sustained crafting of linguistic devices. So it's bringing your structure, it's bringing your language all to play. I will just quickly look at AO6. So students using a range of vocabulary and sentence structures for clarity, purpose, and effect with accurate spelling and punctuation. So your SPAG's absolutely paramount. It's something that you really need to be on top of. Okay. Capital letters, full stops, the very, very basics, the very, very bottom level of your SPAG, making sure it's all tip top. So using sentence demarcation, wide range of punctuation. So can you use all of the punctuation marks available to you. Use a full range of appropriate sentence forms, simple, compound, and complex sentences. Using standard English, don't want to be using slang, don't want to be using text speak, don't want to be using jargon that we've heard off TikTok, Instagram, or anywhere else as such. It has to be standard language, so it has to be full spellings, it has to be written properly. Can we use grammar properly? Can we use tense properly? High level of accuracy in spelling to make sure the only way to do this, if we've got some vocabulary that we like, that's ambitious, it's polysyllabic words, it's big words, we need to make sure we can spell them. All these things are absolutely crucial. The exam papers are your chance to shine, your chance to really impress the examiner. And again, all this hard work that you've put in revision, you want to make it count. You want to impress the examiners. You want to aim for the top marks. Okay. So I will just go back to the question paper now. So 40 marks, 40 minutes of writing, 5 minutes of planning. The way I would approach this statement, write a speech to be given at a meeting. So the speech that is the form. Imagine we are addressing people. We are speaking to, maybe you could imagine it's your year group, year 11. But for this, what we're doing is we are meeting your local council. So that's the audience, the local council. So we could imagine they're adults, maybe they're quite serious, professional people. They want to hear your views on why people should stop using cars, people should make better use of public transport. But what are we trying to argue our point of view for? What is it we're trying to persuade these people to do? What we're trying to convince the councillors to do something, aren't we? Get people off cars. We need to get people to use better public transport. But perhaps, as we know, public transport isn't always reliable. It's quite expensive. So we could think about, right, how could we persuade the councillors to make it a bit more affordable, a bit cheaper for someone of your age? Perhaps someone's in year 11. I don't know if you're in college. You could be an adult learner, but we're trying to persuade that group of people that things need to change. But how do we do that? Let's have a think about it. Okay, so I want to see if I've got an example here very quickly. No, I do not, so it does not matter. So what I would do in this case, I would think to write 5 paragraphs. I want to write 5 paragraphs. I want an introduction, point 1, point 2, point 3, conclusion. Okay, so I'm aiming for 5 paragraphs minimum for this question. Cars are convenient, comfortable, and save time. I would maybe focus on, yeah, they're great, but I would maybe perhaps bring in ideas about climate change, about petrol prices, about transition to renewable energy, about electric cars. So you're thinking, yeah, they're good, but really we need to be shifting, don't we? And we need to be shifting because we need to get more people using public transport. That is the essence of that statement, I think. So your introduction with this question, you're introducing your argument and you're giving a clear argument. But what you are doing, you've got to remember, you don't want to be writing things like, I agree with this statement because blah, 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 petrol costs loads of money and the bus needs to be cheaper. We've been asked to write a speech, so you are writing a speech, you are planning and jotting a speech. Imagine you are on a podium and you are speaking to 200 people. You have to entertain the scenario in order to get full marks, okay? Giving a clear introduction, making a point. You could focus on, for the first point, make public transport cheaper. That could be the topic of your first paragraph. The next topic of your second point could be make it more reliable. Third topic for your final point could be to make public transport easier to access. I always say to my students when I'm tutoring this question, this is a bit like an advert. You get an advert on the telly. It's advertising toothpaste. This toothpaste will give you very white teeth. It will make you look more attractive, and it will keep you teeth healthy and your gums healthy. But adverts always present a problem first. They always present a problem, don't they? Tooth decay is really bad, or of such nature. With these paragraphs, you're presenting the problems first. So for the first paragraph, what you could write about is public transport cheaper. Transport is extortionate. Trams are extortionate. Buses are so expensive. What's the solution? You're trying to persuade the council. What are the solutions? What are the real solutions to this? Okay, so that's what you're thinking about in your paragraphs. Problem, solution. How can you persuade people to come around to your point of view? All I would say as well is language techniques for this question. Da Forest, you may have heard of Da Forest. Direct address, alliteration, facts, opinion, rhetoric, repetition, dafor, emotive language, statistics, triple adjectives. What I always advise my students to do, you're always thinking about including language techniques, aren't you? Okay, so maybe write the acronym, maybe write the, sorry, not the acronym, the mnemonic, that forest down your margin, and think about, right, how many in each line, how can I maximize my chances of pushing my mark up, my grades up by including as many language techniques as I can. There's plenty of resources out there to take full advantage of. But what I would say is to do is perhaps have a look at famous speeches, also look at perhaps resources online for how to write persuasively. They will sort of enrich and deepen your understanding. But like I say, just to give an example, I always write this in the margin of any paper that I'm thinking about writing. So if we have that forest there, oops, my apologies. Okay, so I've just put a bit of an example there. Those are all examples of language techniques that we can use. They will just improve the quality of your writing and they will sort of give you opportunities to build your marks. And that way you will be able to ensure that you've ticked off all of what the examiners are asking you to do. But like I say, this is just sort of it's a very general overview of the top level of what we've been expected to do in the question paper. But do take advantage of past papers, mark schemes, any resources, YouTube online, and you'll be able to deepen and add depth to your understanding of the question papers. Thank you very much if you've got this far. I wish you all the best of luck in your exams. Like I say, if you need any additional support, you can access the internet for a wealth of information. Thank you very much.